What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Lunar Observer March Madness Blowout Bonanza Media Bombshell Catch-Up In-Depth thing. And in this episode we will be covering Kerwan. And to start off is the screenshot you can see right here before you. It is very similar to the last one. Ratchet's on the train, and there's lots of explosions and blarg business going on. This is from a different angle, though. This is when they're entering the tunnel, and now the bomb is flagged by two helicopters and is guarded by one big blarg commando, similarly to last time around, except without the bomb, because there was no bomb in 2002. You just rode around on a train for some reason. And Ratchet here is holding the Predator launcher, which is a returning weapon from Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction and Quest for Booty. So the first screenshot here is right as you arrive on Kerwan, and instead of having one of those graceful "I am landing the ship" animations, Ratchet instead flies in, and unfortunately, whether you go here right after Novalis or you go to Iridia and then Blackwater first and then come here, Ratchet will always be a little bit late. Why is that? Well, it's not your fault, it's always late when he goes in, but anyway. You get a really good look at the Hall of Heroes and the plaza here, where the Rangers get attacked. Now, a couple of frames later, you can, as Ratchet flies along, on the right-hand side you can see a grey building. This is the brand new fitness course, and now it is used as a Galactic Ranger training ground. So this is something that we'll cover later on, and is for when Ratchet is inducted into the Rangers themselves. The layout is basically a mirror image of the original one from 2002. So instead of climbing up the structure and going around it clockwise by going to the left, this time it's going around to the right. But the layout is still pretty much the same as it was before. Now in this picture you can see the giant blarg warship hovering onto the scene. It's huge. So huge, in fact, that if you lost your car keys, blah 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 blah. Crack in time reference. This is just a really good look at the warship, really. Here's Ratchet flying around in the gameplay section, and lots of fire and lasers and that sort of thing. One of the cool parts about the space sections here is that I had assumed from the footage that at least the Metropolis section would be on rails. It wasn't until the March Media Blowout Bonanza that I realized that the Metropolis version would allow you to fly anywhere, just like we already saw on Pokitaru. And that is very cool, because it allows you to see sort of the structure of the level and how it was built. And it's basically to call it a sandbox would not be accurate, but the on-foot section and the Hall of Heroes section, as well as the fitness school section, all take place within the same environment. So there is 100% building accuracy and consistency going on. That's what I really liked about it. Now in this image you can see Ratchet performing a barrel roll. Something that he couldn't do in the original flight sections, I don't think. That was only introduced with Going Commando. But you get a look at the rather bare underside of the ship that he's flying in. Here's a shot of more flying, and on the right hand side near the bottom you can see a billboard. In a previous version, in a previous in-depth and screenshot, this billboard is actually has the text Novalis written across it in English lettering. That has either been removed or the billboard is animated, and that logo just doesn't appear in the time that the ship flies past it. This particular shot is really cool because if you look sort of below and in front of the ship and sort of trace your eyes along the buildings up to the top, it'll reveal the train station, and this is actually the level section that we've seen at PSX. Just above the aiming reticule in the center of the screen is a building with a grass roof, and to the top left of that is the entryway to the train station with the big blue sign, and the train station itself. So you see the actual level layout in this flying ship section, very similar to, again, Pokitaru. As you're flying around, you see the level you just walked through. In this case, it's the level you will walk through. Just above the train station is this clock, and the clock is interesting and important because in the Upper Arsenal version of Metropolis and in Silver City on Bolden, they also had giant towering structures with a clock on the top, and both of those clocks were related to the Insomniac Museum, where if it hit a particular time, I believe 3 o'clock in Ratchet & Clank 2 and 3 to 4 a.m. in Ratchet & Clank 3, then there would be a teleporter that normally it's inactive, but in the time period that I just stated, you would take the warp and it would take you to a route or directly to the Insomniac Museum. I'm not sure if this clock is accurate to the time that the PlayStation 4's clock has been set to, which means that this recording was done at 4:45, either in the afternoon or at night, or if the clock is in fact telling the time in universe and it is in fact 4:45 in Metropolis during this particular gameplay segment. Here's another screenshot. As always, this is how in-devs work. And above Ratchet, you can actually see this very circular platform. This is actually the section that Ratchet will start off in after this particular space flight section is complete. That will be the beginning of the remake of the classic Metropolis gameplay route. This screenshot provides a really good look at the back of the Blarg warship that Ratchet will be destroying in both the game and the movie. Here is Ratchet flying around, and this gives a really good look at the actual fitness course. The first island has been slightly redesigned. You still climb up a short section to test your general jump up to the top of a platform section, just like the original island, followed by a small jump slot, followed by a tall jump slot. But the exact arrangement and heights and layout is a little bit different this time around. The second island, as I said, is identical, and the third island, while not identical to the old third island from 2002's Metropolis, it still serves the function as being, there's not really any gameplay here, you're just here to pick up your reward, and now you can take the taxi and get back to what you were doing. As Ratchet flies around, he can use the mag booster on the ship, which is an element used in the movies, to lift up all of these warbots, and if you do it around the Hall of Heroes, this isn't directly stated, but contextually speaking, you are actually helping out the Galactic Rangers because you are removing enemies for them and taking them away. And if you look just underneath the gold dome, you can actually see Quark, Brax, and Cora trying to defend the Hall of Heroes. Here's a screenshot from the movie. After you complete this section, you don't actually see the warship blowing up in gameplay. You actually see it as a movie cutscene, and this is part of the movie. And here you can see Dallas Wanamaker, which, as I said in a previous in-depth, is his last name from not in-game sources, so it was really cool that they reused it here. The robot behind him, as I've stated before, is a robot that was previously seen in Tools of Destruction's 2006 tech demo. During E3 2006, there was a behind closed doors video of Insomniac showing off what Metropolis from Ratchet & Clank 1 might look like in HD. Funnily enough, modern Metropolis looks pretty much just like that, or at least similar in visual quality. But at the end of that particular clip, there was an army of robots marching along in a line, hovering above the ground, and one of those robots has been used for the movie, which is a really cool Easter egg. This is a picture of Ratchet finishing up his interview with Juanita. We know from the movie that Dallas, in particular, wanted an interview with Ratchet, and given that he's accompanied by Juanita and he's finishing up a discussion here, Juanita is also probably a co-worker for Dallas, She obviously isn't the psychotic character that she was in Deadlocked, and her new face design shows that. She feels much more friendly. The only other change to her design is the removal of the Deadlocked pin that was above one of her breasts. But, you know, she's not on Deadlocked, so it's obvious why that wouldn't be there. So this is pretty clearly meant to be Ratchet finishing up his interview. And if you look at the red device underneath the nose hole of Ratchet's ship, that is a bomb that was placed there by the Blarg. And what happens is that Ratchet actually jumps out of the way of the explosion with Clank after noticing it, and then he lands down on a platform far below, and then he begins making his way back to the Hall of Heroes. And along the way, he stops the Blarg from doing the, blowing up the Hall of Heroes with a bomb, which is gameplay that we've seen before. So here's Ratchet at the beginning of the classic 2002 section. Obviously, there is no sort of horizontal balcony plaza sort of look. Instead, it is a straightforward route through a tunnel, and then that will lead down to the arched walkway bridge that descends down into the main gameplay section. This, however, looks a lot prettier. So here's Ratchet about to walk through the tunnel, and the reason why I included this screenshot is this is another reference to the 2006 E3 tech demo of Metropolis, because the patterning of the walkway, this sort of diamond shape, combined with multiple rotating cog wheels with teeth that actually rotate in opposite directions, so half rotate clockwise, the other half rotate counterclockwise, and it's sort of interlaced between them, so one is clockwise, two is counterclockwise, etc., etc. That is pretty much exactly the same as the tech demo, so very cool that Insomniac did this for the new design. Here's Ratchet at the vendor. Well, you can't see he's at the vendor, and this is the PS4 Mr. Zircon, the humble symphonoid programmed to protect its operator on the battlefield. It costs 8,000 bolts, which is, again, not that expensive, but Metropolis is technically the second level in the game, and weapons are already at 8,000, so this leads credence to my escalating weapon prices idea. So here's Ratchet on the path. This would be sort of the central walkway in front of the vendor, as depicted in the original Ratchet and Clank. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner that there is a big fat ring around the quick select, the D-pad quick select. And I'm not exactly sure how this particular menu is operated. I haven't really seen the context as to how it would work. I'm guessing that the ring might be what's on the quick select, maybe, and so you change what is on each pad by putting a weapon in either the top left, in either the 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or 9 o'clock positions on the quick select. But that doesn't make much sense to me, because the convenience of the D-pad quick select is not just selecting your favorite weapons even quicker than with the triangle quick select, but also in the potential that it can take away 4 weapons from the quick select. And when you only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 slots on a quick select, taking away half of that and putting it somewhere else you can access just as easily is a huge boon if you have a lot of weapons that you either love and or want to upgrade. As for how you change the weapons on the D-pad, again, that's not very clear, because the GameSpot guys, they were able to change they were able to switch out the combustor with Mrs. Zircon on the D-pad quick select, but I'm not entirely sure how that even worked. They didn't talk about it, nor did the game visually explain how to do it. Again, I don't know why. Maybe they've already done this tutorial before. Actually, no, it can't be the something o'clock positions, because the Groovatron is on the right D-pad button, and yet it is at the 8 o'clock position on that wheel. Oh well, I'm sure we'll find out when the game comes out. So this picture is looking in the opposite direction, and shock and horror, the fitness course is not there anymore. But as I've established earlier, it is at the end of the level, so no worries. This is a sight that should also be familiar. This is basically walking away from the bridge where the helicopter is, and you can see a bunch of cover crates up there. This is from the Polygon playthrough, and the Polygon person playing this, probably Nick Robinson, doesn't actually make any attempt to get up here. He doesn't have a helipack at the time, so there's no reason why you should think he would be able to make that, but that is actually consistent with 2002, because as in that game, you had to return to the spot later after you picked up the helipack from Al a short while down the path, and then come back here to get the gold bolt, which is a little bit inconvenient, and you can easily forget it. I've done that many times. This picture is Ratchet at the end of the bridge with the helipack thing associated. Sorry, not the helipack, the helicopter. The yellow blug helicopter that you can't forget, except I just forgot it. In the original game, there would be a building on the left-hand side and at the back end of this area, but with the removal of that, this has now been turned into more of a lone balcony. However, the original layout is kind of sort of referenced by the fact that there's a big old tree at the end, which might be a reference to the little tree garden from the original route. And here is at the bottom of the next staircase. Instead of a giant bronze statue of a rocket, it has now been replaced by this sort of elevated pool. And the reason that I'm thinking that this has been done is because enemies are much more persistent and kinetic and fast in this game, and so it's much more likely that you'll get into a combat scenario around this particular pool, and having a big statue there that you can't even walk through would be inconvenient. So replacing it with a pool at least makes the battleground easier to navigate and for you to fire, because you don't really have as much in the way. I didn't really include the shot for anything other than the fact that there's lots of sparklies from when Ratchet destroys this billboard. Here's a incredibly JPEG-y shot from GameSpot's playthrough. As Ratchet is getting to Big Al's Robo Shack, he actually voices over the intercom that he is 7 levels into Unicop 2, Return of Unicop, and so help me if I have to put down this controller. And this is particularly interesting to me because Unicop was previously only introduced with a crack in time, and it was pretty much forgotten after that. But here it is in the era of Ratchet and Clank 1. So how I've taken this is that with the PS4 game, Insomniac and Rainmaker by association have taken all of the backstory lore of Ratchet and Clank up until Into the Nexus, things like particular characters that only exist until then, various background properties such as Unicop 2, things like the Zoni, Space Pirates, even though they haven't shown up yet, Fongoids, Tharpods, that sort of thing. They've brought that into the Ratchet and Clank 1 era so that they can fully flesh out the background world of the new movieverse without having to create anything new. Saves money, of course, and that also means that they can forge their own path with even more content moving forwards. That's how I've taken it. This particular image from the walkway has Ratchet having a ton of fun with the Groovatron and the helicopter pilot. The helicopter guy has a crazy Groovatron animation where the helicopter sort of swings out to the side and the pilot does these crazy Michael Jackson style dance moves as he flies up into the air. Then he lands into the helicopter and does it again as it swings around to the other side. It is easily my favorite Groovatron animation that has ever been done. Now you might think that the platform in the distance is actually a place that you can go to, but it's not. You never actually go there. This is part of the level design that helps contextualize all the walking platforms, where if there are lots of platforms that look like you go there, but you don't, then that makes it less weird that the platforms you're already walking on exist. If you think back to the original Kerwan Metropolis level from 2002, all of the grassy walkways that you walk on are also happen to be the only ones in the city. If you look out into the distance or use the Visibomb, you never see any similar grass platforms, and when you think about it, that's a bit weird. So the inclusion of balconies such as the one I've just pointed out helps make the ones that you actually use less jarring. The fact that, oh, these happen to be explicitly designed for the level. How convenient. This picture shows the level of detail that is shown on the buttons after you've pressed it. The light is dimmed, but there's still a lot of reflection on the hexagonal pattern plastic that covers the actual light surface inside. It makes the button look really cool. And everyone likes cool buttons, don't they? Here is a big fat reference to Insomniac's past. The lore thing that I was talking about earlier is again appearing here with My Blaster Runs Hot, which is a game for film that Quark participated in 2009 called My Blaster Runs Hot, starring Captain Romulus Slag as evil mastermind Gabriel von Cavendish, and Rusty Pete as, what was it? He was a lawyer named Slate McSteel. But in addition, they have posters for Spiro the Space Moose, who, with his yellow horns, purple suit, and yellow plated underbelly armor plating, is a pretty obvious reference to Spyro the Dragon. His pose is even very similar to Spyro's artwork pose from the PlayStation 3 Legend of Spyro saga. And Fongoid with a stick is a reference to the game that Insomniac attempted to make before Ratchet and Clank. They were trying to do a fantasy game about, I think it was a teenage girl, and she had a wooden staff, and she would use magical powers related to the staff. However, during development, it was summed up to, it had the working title of Girl with a Stick. And they cancelled the project because Insomniac didn't have the heart in it, and, you know, a week or two later, they had Ratchet and Clank on their hands, and they made that. So that's the fun lore reference with Girl with a Stick. And the name was actually used for the beta of Resistance 3 in the XMB menu. And the last poster is for Intransigence Fall of Blarg, which is obviously a reference to Resistance Fall of Man, with the gritty style poster and the logo that looks like a skull, which is a reference to the Chimera skull, and also the on the cover of Resistance Fall of Man, and also the one on the Olimos artwork for Resistance 3. Here's a picture of Big Al. He has been redesigned. His facial structure is a bit different. He is much more cat-like, and he has the logo of his RoboShack. We now know that is for the RoboShack emblazoned on his shirt. One of the buttons is of the Captain Quark logo, and the one underneath is of a bolt icon. That bolt icon has actually been used for the bolt HUD element since Up Your Arsenal. So that is a pretty deep-cut lore reference to me. This is also a very nice shot where you can see the detailing of how he's got fur on the top of his hand, and yet it recedes away to reveal skin on his fingers and thumb. So here's Ratchet leaving Al's RoboShack, and this is also a familiar sight for any long-time Ratchet and Clank players. This is the helipack training area after Al has given Clank his helipack. So you high jump up to the top of the crates, and then you stretch jump over to the elevator. That structure is still intact. The only thing that isn't there are the two dog robots that come out from the sides. That has been removed so that you can focus purely on the tutorial area. However, if you check at the back of those crates, you will actually find a stick of Raritanium for you to use, so you still get a little bit of bonus for checking the back of the place. Here's Ratchet at the top of the elevator I just mentioned. On the middle of the platform, you can see this bronze embossed pattern on it, and that appears to be an embossed version of the Planetary Defense Center-like building that sort of acts as the central landmark of this area. The Hall of Heroes is placed quite close to it, and this embossed emblem appears several times throughout Metropolis. With this picture, you can see on the the window grill things on the distant building that the elevator is attached to, that there are actually cog teeth on the top and bottom. I thought that was quite cute. Here's Ratchet gliding down to the platform after doing a stretch jump at the top of the elevator. What's interesting here is that I can't tell if this is an artifact of the motion blur, or if in fact the helicopter propellers are a different shape. They have sort of like a hockey stick stocking foot shape to them, at least when Ratchet is gliding. Very odd. And here Ratchet levels up the combustor to level 3. It is reached. It gains plus 36% damage. Nice. And in this one, the proton drum levels up to level 3, but it only gains 34% damage. Favoritism! But you can also get a really good look at the robot dog at the bottom of the screen. What's interesting is that in GameSpot's playthrough, which is where this screenshot comes from, the game doesn't actually pause when you level up, but in the Polygon playthrough it did, so there's probably something that you can set in the options menu, which is accurate to past Ratchet and Clank games such as A Crack in Time. Now this screenshot I've included because this grassy area is the start of where we saw the PSX demo begin. Beforehand there was a door that was in the doorway, the circular doorway where Ratchet is about to walk through at the moment. This confirms my theory at the time that this section takes place after Al's RoboShack, and I spotted it looking at an obscure camera angle when I was playing at PSX. A really creepy detail actually, if Ratchet gets bitten by the robot dogs, they actually tear out a chunk of fur and shake it about madly. Like, Ratchet now has bald spots apparently. The subtitles for this picture are interesting because they say, "A Galactic Ranger, let's kill him!" And while Ratchet has technically been inducted into the Rangers, he hasn't actually gotten his full armor and he hasn't completed the training course yet. It isn't that well known that he is a Ranger yet. It makes sense for later levels, of course, but this early in Metropolis, the blog must have incredibly good news sources to even realize that Ratchet is a Galactic Ranger at this stage, right? Or even just call him a Galactic Ranger rather than the New Ranger, or something like that. Now this screenshot reveals something that wasn't in the original PSX demo. You have these two blogs that descend down the stairs from the train station. That is a new element that wasn't there before when I was playing the game at PSX, so this makes an already tricky fight even more interesting. And by interesting, I mean, oh god, 2 more of them. A very cool screenshot. This is Ratchet in the secret area of the train section behind the transport crates, and he's found a pack of holo cards. This is particularly noteworthy because when I played through the PSX demo and made my way into this secret area, there was nothing here but crates. There was no holodeck cards because that mechanic wasn't implemented in the games at that point. So it's pretty clear that this particular area with no apparent reward in it had a holocard deck inside in it as its reward instead of a gold bolt that they decided to delete. There's a very similar instance of this on the opposite side of the train station with another secret area that would lead to a gold bolt from where it was in 2002. Again, oh my gosh, there's no gold bolt, maybe they deleted it for some reason. Nope, there was supposed to be a holo card pack and Insomniac decided not to introduce that gameplay mechanic so soon. Very clever of them. Now this screenshot shows something that I really honestly should have picked up on the first time around, but I didn't. During the Metropolis train car section, Ratchet comes across this yellow train car with a crane on it. But what I didn't notice is if you look just to the left of the health bar, you can see that there's a container on it and there are a whole bunch of slingshot Versa targets, which means that this particular carriage is carrying slingshot Versa targets, and that's why there is actually a crane that Ratchet can swing out with a Versa target on it in the first place. It's not one of those, oh, a platforming mechanic that you have and need, and we won't even justify it in the environmental design. Here, they have, which is very nice. This particular screenshot, again, I apologize for the JPEGiness, but GameSpot did a live stream and the quality wasn't all that good, even on the best quality, because there's so much movement in Ratchet and Clank. Here you can see that the proton drum actually projects this light pattern underneath it on the ground. I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of it is though. It doesn't seem to serve any actual gameplay function, aside from obviously the very important one of looking really cool. Here's an interesting detail that I didn't even think about when I was playing the Kerwan demo. While you're on the train, you can actually cause this frame carrying two Blarg fighters and actually have it roll off of the side of the train. However, you can actually do this late or early enough that it will occur in a tunnel. And what's happening here is that the spaceship that has dropped out of the frame here actually makes an impact with the inside of the tunnel and explodes, as opposed to clipping through it. Again, just so many pieces of detail here. Here's Ratchet climbing up the fish tank, and if you look in the distance you can see the background cards, the 2D cards of buildings. This is something that Insomniac has been using in every version of Metropolis, but from this particular angle during this particular part of the sequence, it is quite obvious what they are, at least to me. You know, the 3D buildings have blue shadows, whereas the ones in the distance have yellow shadows. It just looks a little bit odd. They contrast and conflict a little bit. It's a bit hard to spot, but if you look in this picture to the left of the Blarg that is shooting at Ratchet, you'll see a fusion grenade. That fusion grenade was actually on a collision course with the Blarg, but then the train started taking a corner and the fusion grenade missed. This is a particular element that threw off both GameSpot's and Polygon's live stream playthroughs. Well, GameSpot's was a live stream, but it disrupted both their playthroughs as you don't have the Warmonger here like you did in PSX, so you have to use the fusion grenades to take out enemies such as the Blarg, as the Combustor is still pretty weak at this stage in the game. But then if the train takes a turn, then all of a sudden you just wasted a shot, so you have to be really careful as to where the train is going and what it will do next. Similarly to the starship being blown up by chucking him off in a tunnel, when this Blarg is defeated and falls off the side of the train, he actually impacts the bottom of the tunnel and does a death animation. Very, very cool. This is a frame of an animation that I didn't even know was in the game, where when Ratchet jumps down from hanging off of a ledge, he actually turns around and sort of uses his back foot to help guide him down. It's a very cool turning around animation detail, as opposed to the usual, oh, I'll just let go animation from the PS2 and 3 games. Another detail that has to do with climbing ledges is that every time Ratchet jumps up from the topmost rung of a ladder or a ledge, he will always do a forward flip. Unfortunately, when it comes to situations with things falling off the train, not everything has been accounted for. Here there are a bunch of crates flying off of the train because Ratchet has just shot down a Blargian helicopter and has collided with a pile of them and they're flying away. However, if you look on the building to the left, you can see that one of the crates is actually clipping through the building. That don't look good. Oh dear. Now, this particular frame is quite funny because Ratchet has fired a combustor shot at the Blarg helicopter and the train takes a turn. However, the combustor has general auto-targeting, so with its auto-targeting on top of the fact that the train is moving means that the combustor shot actually travels a much further distance than it is usually able to, which results in this very amusing orange, red, yellow arc here. This is the train that Ratchet has just debombed as it's about to explode, and because it is going around a corner, you can actually see just how long this train is. It is a pretty long train. You go down many carriages. And here is Ratchet arriving at the Hall of Heroes. This is something that we've known before. However, at the PSX demo, Ratchet only said, Brax, come in, I'm arriving at the Hall of Heroes. What's different here is that, one, Ratchet's voice has been put under a radio filter, and two, Brax actually responds by saying, copy that, I'll meet you at the front entrance and we'll begin your training. That puts an additional context as to when the scene occurs. Now, for us watching this now, it's pretty obvious, but back at PSX at 2015, it wasn't really obvious when the scene takes place. I mean, has Ratchet been inducted into the Rangers yet? Who knows, but now we do. And on the far right hand side, this is probably a new addition, but you can see a walkway that leads over to the fitness course, the Galactic Ranger fitness course. Here is Alaris in the movie scene where she is playing up her arsenal. And it's a scene that we've seen before from the website clips, but this is an angle that isn't in those website clips. And if you look at what Alaris is holding, yep, we've explained this before, it's a PlayStation 4 controller. And you can tell, again, because of the shape of the triggers. It is very PlayStation 4-like, so a really cool detail. Here's Ratchet after having his armor applied and coming in the latest fall colors. And I took the screenshot because you get a really good look at the detailing on the underside of his gloves and sort of the perforated sections that help give him extra grip when he needs it. Here is the perforated sections of Ratchet's armor again, except this time as it is depicted in the video game. And it is noticeably a much darker and more saturated shade of blue than what was in the movie. I'm also noticing, literally just now, that Ratchet's cap in his Ranger armor is a different material. It seems to be made out of a type of space-age denim type material, rather than the weathered leather that he starts out the game wearing. Here's the shot of the brand new fitness course. It is obviously not as established and is way more ramshackle than the old one. Apparently it was designed by Captain Quark, and that is honestly a shock to me, because if it was designed by Captain Quark, then it would either be dead easy or a convoluted mess. But anyway, I just took this picture because I really like the look of it. Sort of Ratchet standing in front of the fitness course. He looks so cool and optimistic. His life has yet to be completely ruined by all the evil forces that will come to attack him in the next frame. Just kidding. A particular cutscene cinematic view of the fitness course. The obstacles should be very familiar. Basically blocks that push in and out that provide either platforms or jump slots for you to use. And here's the cinematic view again as it leads over to the third island of the fitness course. Unfortunately, Helga does not seem to be present here. It is instead a series of Captain Quark vocal bots that originally only started out the fitness course. Also, at the end is a gold bolt. This is interesting because that means that this gold bolt is completely mandatory, or is at least incredibly obvious for the player to pick up. So the player will always learn about gold bolts and what they do. Fun fact, picking up one gold bolt actually unlocks a cheat. It's small and aesthetic, but it still works. Here are the pennants that I mentioned. The one on the left has the middle of the Galactic Ranger symbol, sort of the spaceship. The icon in the middle has Brax, and the icon on the right has Cora on it. Here's Ratchet jumping up the jump slots. I just really like the reflections on display here and the glowiness and that sort of goodness. Instead of taking a zip line down to the next course, which doesn't seem to be a mechanic in the PS4 game, Ratchet actually takes a swing shot. And yeah, as you can probably guess, it is an incredibly long cable that he gets to use. How Brax and Cora and Quark were able to complete this course when they had to do the fitness course is completely... I have no idea how they did it. Maybe they used jetpacks, perhaps? And again, here is Ratchet climbing up the platforms on the second island. Just very good and wonderful detailing and lighting effects on the metals and that sort of thing on display here. I just love the look of this game, seriously. I always hated this when I was playing the PS2 game. You think you pick the right side, but then you end up on the opposite end of the platforms retracting, and if you don't get across on to the proper side correctly, then you're gonna have to fall down and try it again. Yeah, never nice ending up on the wrong side of these jump slots. I know it's small, I always make it, but I prefer being on the right side. It would be nice if, say, from this point on to the next obstacle, the course was symmetrical, so that it didn't matter which side you picked on, because it was always right, unless you went left, of course. Yeah, again, no idea how Brax and Cora were able to get there, because now they can't even use the swing shot. Ratchet has to glide, and how did they glide to get here? Was there a bridge, but Captain Quark forgot to repair it? Ratchet picking up the gold bolt, and also a really good look at the Captain Quark bot. It doesn't have the Quark logo emblazoned on the front of it. Instead, there's sort of like this button-esque chest light with the logo printed or displayed on it. Here's Ratchet riding along in the new taxi, and for those who have really good memories or stumbled upon the concept art recently, like I did, the design of this taxi is actually identical to the taxi design concept art that we saw. I forget how long ago it was. It was either last year or the year before that, but the design is identical, and it is actually a design used in the movie and was director approved by Kevin Monroe himself. And it is used in the game, so that's super cool. The taxi is a different design than it usually is. The taxis in the PS3 games were a remake of what was done in the 2002 games, which was basically a flat taxi that you stood on. And in the PS3 games, they added like a steering wheel and fuzzy dice and some back seats. Here, there are actually walls that prop up and doors that you can walk out of. So it is more contextual, and it puts Ratchet in a sort of pit as he flies along. Sort of, if Ratchet can move in these sections, the walls establish that the player can move without fear of falling off. However, I'm not sure if you can actually jump off the taxi and fall off. But if you do, it's your own damn fault. A rear view of the taxi and a rear view of the first island of the fitness course. One cool design aspect is that if you look at the rear thrusters of the taxi and compare them to that of the ship that Ratchet used to arrive on Metropolis, they actually bear a visual similarity to each other. They're sort of really long, thin cone shapes. That implies that both the taxi and that particular ship share the same type of engine, just, you know, one has a much larger one than the other. So that's really cool, sort of like ships sharing the same engines. That implies there are different types, there are companies that manufacture them, all that sort of background, not directly stated lore goodness. Here's the polygon playthrough getting as close as they can to the Hall of Heroes. The gate doesn't open, and the distant area doesn't appear to be very detailed, so I don't think you will ever go through here. Appropriate for Captain Quark, the lead up actually has a giant red carpet. Here's Captain Quark giving Ratchet his new ship, now that he's part of the Rangers. Rather begrudgingly, it must be said. You can actually visit the other two worlds that we'll be covering, Iridia and Rilgar, without coming to Metropolis, and that means that Ratchet will have a different skin and different armor when he visits those two worlds. One of the things that I noticed in this particular picture is that the Q logo on Captain Quark's chest is much smaller than it used to be, and I think is in fact smaller than it is depicted in the movie version of Captain Quark. So, more intermedia inconsistencies. Ooh. Here's a screenshot from the video that Captain Quark gives. It is pretty obviously a death mission, and Captain Quark is trying to get Ratchet killed. This is pretty much the best look at the Galactic Ranger logo that we've seen thus far. And here is a look at a brand new gadget, which is called the Infiltrator. Except it's not the Infiltrator, it's the Trespasser. It just looks like the Infiltrator painted grey and red. And if you look at the Rilgar in-depth video that will be coming up after this, well, which will be coming up after Iridia, which is coming up after this, then you will be able to see the Trespasser Infiltrator in action. Here's a picture again from the video, and this is mainly here so that I can decrypt what the text at the top left corner says. It says top secret, super secret stuff. Here is a very artful depiction of Captain Quark. It looks very similar to the giant vinyl figures that have become so collectible among Ratchet and Clank fans and so expensive. It's got that classic chiseled big and small creature box style that they've become so famous for. And the last image for Kerwan is Ratchet running along a hallway firing the combustor. The look of this appears very similar. Well, it's aesthetically similar to the look for the GrumbleNet weapon description videos, but a bit less exaggerated, and Ratchet looks a little bit more like his normal self here. And that about wraps it up for Kerwan. These are taking quite a long time, but I hope you guys aren't too bored, and if you are, then maybe you should click over to a video that you're interested in, either another in-depth video, a Lunar Observer video, or just a completely different video on YouTube. Whatever you like, but hopefully you've become interested enough to join me for the next video, which will be covering Planet Iridia.